Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's just jump right in. We're all pushing for a cleaner planet, right? But what if? What if the whole race for green energy was actually built on a foundation of injustice? Today, we're digging into a proposal that asks a really tough question. What is the true cost of progress, and who is being forced to pay for it?
Look, we all want this clean energy future. The promise, on one hand, is all about justice, equity, a people-centered transition. Sounds great, right? But then, there's the reality. For so many communities, especially indigenous peoples who are deeply connected to their land, the reality is, well, it's being uprooted. It's poverty. It's losing everything. And that is the huge, troubling paradox at the very heart of this green transition.
So yeah, this paradox is really where we need to start. I mean, think about it. How can the solution to a massive global crisis like climate change end up causing so much documented harm to some of the world's most vulnerable people? It just doesn't add up.
And make no mistake, the source material is absolutely crystal clear on this. For like half a century, research has shown what happens when these huge development projects roll in, even the green ones. We're talking about a total devastation for communities. It's not just one thing, it's landlessness, homelessness, food insecurity. I mean, look at this list. It's a complete unraveling of the social and cultural fabric that holds people's lives together.
Okay, so you're probably thinking, wait a minute, aren't there rules for this? Safeguards to prevent this kind of thing? And you'd be right, there are. They're often called safeguards, first pioneered by big institutions like the World Bank. But here's the kicker. The evidence is just overwhelming that they're not working. Let's dig into why.
And this right here gets to the absolute heart of the problem. You can see how it works. All the decisions are made way up at the top, and the community is just left powerless at the bottom. The current standards, they just assume from the get-go that taking the land is okay, that it's justified. The whole process is led by the developers themselves, which pretty much shuts communities out of having any real say in their own futures. It's a broken system.
You know, this quote from the proposal just says it all, doesn't it? Communities are treated as passive stakeholders rather than rights holders. That's it. That's the core problem in a nutshell. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of what a community is. They aren't just another box to check on a form. They are rights holders with a legitimate claim to their land and, a right to decide their own future.
So the really crucial point here is we need more than just, slightly better rules or some tweaks to the existing standards. The proposal we're looking at today says, nope, we need to throw that out. It calls for a completely new way of thinking, a whole new framework for how these projects are done. And right at the very heart of this new framework is this really powerful idea called community agency. What does that mean? Well, it's about a massive shift in perspective. It's about stopping seeing people as obstacles to be managed or overcome, and instead recognizing them as partners, as the true custodians of their land, and as totally capable agents in making the huge decisions that will fundamentally change their lives.
Okay, so how do you take this big idea, community agency, and actually make it happen on the ground? Well, the proposal lays out a really concrete 6-point plan to make it a reality.
All right, these first 3 steps, they're all about empowerment and prevention. First, you give communities not just information, but their own independent experts. We're talking engineers, lawyers, social scientists, so they can actually understand the real impacts. Then, the whole focus shifts to avoiding harm in the first place. And finally, you make sure that if there is a negotiation, it happens on a totally level playing field.
Yeah, and this visual really nails the goal here. See, it's all about leveling those scales. It's not enough to just dump a stack of technical documents on people. Real access means giving communities the independent expert support they absolutely need to challenge the developer's claims and to truly shape the outcome, right from the very beginning.
Okay, so the next 3 steps are all about creating real, actual accountability. They put strict limits on when a government can just forcibly take land, making sure it meets a super high human rights bar. They demand that any agreement isn't just a piece of paper, it has to be a legally binding contract that can be independently monitored and enforced. And this is crucial, it calls on all the powerful players in the supply chain to use their influence, their leverage, to make all of this happen.
Right, so this all sounds great in theory, but the proposal gets really specific about who actually holds the power to turn this new approach from just a bunch of good ideas into a reality on the ground.
So, who makes this happen? The plan lays out a really clear chain of responsibility. It argues that all these key players, all along the investment and supply chain, can use their leverage to drive this massive change.
And it really starts with the money. Think about it. The project financiers, the development banks, the big commercial lenders, the investors, they have immense power. They can simply say no. They can refuse to fund projects that don't follow this just approach. Or they can make it a non-negotiable condition of their loans before a single shovel ever hits the ground.
Then you've got the buyers. Their influence can literally turn the gears of the entire supply chain. By just changing their own procurement policies, they can create this huge ripple effect, forcing their suppliers to adopt better practices, which then, in turn, forces developers to actually engage with communities in a respectful way. And finally, that brings us to the big brands we all know. You know, the car manufacturers, the tech companies, they have the power to bridge that massive gap between us, the end consumer, and the community at the source. The proposal argues they have a real responsibility to look past their direct suppliers and make sure human rights are being respected at the true source of their materials.
So at the end of the day, a just green transition is possible. It's not some utopian dream, but it requires a fundamental shift in power, a shift away from distant boardrooms and into the hands of the people whose lives, whose lands, and whose cultures are actually on the line. And that really leaves us with the final crucial question, one for all of us to think about. What is the true price of progress, and who should get to decide if it's worth paying?